Hi, this is Roger in Finland, and today we're reviewing the DJI Osmo Action as a vlogging camera in the cold. So from the impatient ones, the DJI Action is a great little 4K 60p electronically stabilized action camera, and yes, it's cold. We have right now minus 17 degrees Celsius. And for those of you living in Fahrenheit land, I think that that's about 0. So yeah, and even if this is an action cam, I don't do much of extreme sports, which is why action cams were invented in the first place. I get scared easily, what can I tell you? But I'm gonna say that taking a walk and talking at the same time at minus 17 degrees, it's enough of an extreme sport for me. So here we are. One reason why I think that this is an excellent action cam for this type of weather is because I don't want to have to take my gloves too many times to fiddle with buttons and dials and menus and whatnot. And I know that other cameras are also automatic in some mode or other. It doesn't get more practical and more automatic than this. And it's light. It's very light. Even if now I have it mounted on a mini tripod and there's a microphone on top of it, it's still very, very light compared to the last time I took something in the cold, which was the Panasonic G9. Oh gosh, that's a heavy thing for vlogging. And even if this thing is waterproof up to 10 meters, I'm not gonna try it now. It looks a little bit too frozen to retrieve it from under the water. But being waterproof, it kind of make it weatherproof, so I'm hoping that it's very cold proof. And this is also rugged, so if it falls in the snow, I'm okay. Well, to be honest, right now I would not be okay if this falls in the snow because of the microphone on top of it. But if I would be carrying the camera alone in the pocket, which sometimes I do, then you're fine. So this is 4K 60. And the buttons are tiny bit difficult to operate with the gloves. Still much better than a normal camera. And because this is a camera review, we have to go through some specs. So let's do this. When it comes to resolutions, you have 4K between 24 and 60p, and all the different frame rates are electronically stabilized. And this is also a test of how the DJI Osmo Action handles backlight and the sun in my neck. And believe me, in Finland this is not turning me into a redneck. Then there is also a 4K with 4:3 aspect ratio that has only the 30 frames per second mode, and it's not stabilized, and I have no use for it either. Weirdly enough, there's also a 2.7K with the 4:3 aspect ratio, which is also not stabilized, but unless you have the option to shoot in 24 or 30 frames per second. Still, have no use for it. Then, in the 2.7K resolution, you have the same frame rates and stabilization than you get in 4K, so it goes from 24 to 60. And I wonder, why would you use 2.7 if the limitations are the same than 4K? So file size is the only thing that comes to mind. Then in 1080p, you get between 24 and 60 frames per second with the rock steady electronic stabilization, and you can still go from 100 to 240 frames per second, but then you do not get the stabilization. But it is so slow motion-y that the stabilization is then not needed so much anymore. And finally, you get a 720p resolution that is only a high frame rate one, which goes from 200 to 240 frames per second without stabilization. So once again, exactly the same limitation than 1080p with exactly the same frame rate, so I would just use the 1080p. If you want, you get some manual control. So if you put this thing in manual, you can operate manually the ISO, which goes from 100 to 3200. Then also the shutter speed, which goes from 1/25th of a second all the way to 1/8000 of a second, which I'm pretty sure is what it's trying to do right now because of the sun. But these are the two things that you can touch manually. The aperture you can't change. Then if you put into the automatic mode, what you can set is what is the max ISO. Again, 3200 is not that super high, so I just leave it there. And also the EV compensation. Right now it's at 0. So you tell me how the snow looks like. Another setting that can be tweaked is the white balance. And here you have the options of normal, underwater, because this thing can go underwater, or custom, which basically then you can just set the Kelvin manually. Finally, we have the color, which here you have two options. One is normal, the other one is Cine-like D. D is Cine-like, make it very different from the Panasonic Cine-like D. And this should give you a bit more dynamic range, a bit flatter image. You should have more room in post to edit, color grade, and do whatever you want. But let's be honest, this is an action cam. If you really want to do color grading and stuff, probably you're not going to do it with this camera. Then there's the dewarping, which what it does is basically flattens the image in a way that it doesn't look so much like a fish eye lens, and I have it always on because I never liked the fish eye look. That's a matter of taste, but I'm very happy that the warp is there and that it works very nicely. The last setting you can change from a video perspective is the format, or actually it's the container. So does it make MOV files or does it make MP4 files, even though the codec is always H.264. But for me, I always keep everything in automatic, the color in the normal mode as well, and then I use either 4K 25 or 4K 60 if I want a bit of slow motion in 4K, or then if I just record a really long clip, I usually then go to 1080 25p, or if I go on the really super slow motion-y thing, then 1080 and 240 frames per second. As I said, I don't see the use for the 2.7K, since it just gives you a bit less resolution, or a bit more, somewhere in the between of the 1080 and the 4K, but the limitations are the same than 4K. So there we are. Okay, what else before it gets too cold? I think that my mustache is getting frozen already. Battery, yeah. It's interchangeable, which is nice. The replacement batteries are actually pretty cheap. They're going about 29 euros at the moment for original ones, now third party brands. And I always have decided that the first day that I'm going to run out of battery while using the camera and I would have needed another one, I'll get a replacement. Hasn't happened yet for me. I'm sure it's a use case kind of thing, but in more than a year of using this camera in different scenarios, I never run out of one single battery. The day it happens, I'm gonna get a second one. One nice thing is that you don't need a charger to charge these batteries. So the Osmo Action has a USB port and it charges through that, so you can just have a power bank in your back, and when the camera is there, plug to the power bank and it will then recharge. Then we have the audio, and you have been hearing me so far with the Rode Video Micro plugged into the camera by using the CY Nova adapter. So that's an adapter that plugs to the side, into the USB port, and then it has a 3.5mm jack. And here you can just plug the Rode Video Micro like I have, or a lavalier mic or something like that, and you do get external audio. And this is how it sounds with the internal microphone, which is okay if you're close enough. This is so and so. If you hold it here, it probably sounds better, but I don't like to see myself so close from the camera. You might have heard me complaining about this in this other video. In general, I've been really happy with the image quality of this thing. It's not comparable to maybe a cinema camera, but it isn't, right? For being an action cam, I'm very happy with the image quality about this. I can only compare it to the GoPro 5, which is the one that I had before this one, so not comparable at all, probably very different generation type of cameras, but I have not found a reason to upgrade from this to anything else. DJI has not released a Osmo Action 2, like they have just released the Pocket 2, meaning that gimbal little thing, but they have been keeping on upgrading the camera via firmware. So at the beginning when this was released, there was a terrible lag with the front screen and using Rocksteady, which is stabilization, but they really got rid of that. They fixed it well, and I believe that with the last firmware update, which I have not yet installed, they have improved the autofocus. Again, not a super big deal, really small sensor, very wide lens, almost everything is in focus all the time, but this thing has a longish short focus distance, so now I need to use an extension tripod or just elongate your arm, but this is good enough for me. Because of being an action cam, because of having a really small sensor, do not expect excellent low light qualities. This thing does need light to perform, that's for sure, but in case you need to use it in the dark, now you have seen how it looks like. So there you go, The DJI Osmo Action is definitely my favorite winter, cold weather, pocketable, lightweight, 4K 60p action camera with electronic stabilization and decent image quality. That was take number 27. Please stay tuned for some more Osmo Action videos. The next one hopefully indoors so that my mustache does not get frozen on the process of making the video. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe. And we're gonna see you soon for some more content. Today this looks like the Finland you might imagine.